Hey there, it's John here, and this is just a quick Scrivener tutorial for an article on the Sharp Writing website, my writing website. This one is about how I remind myself of the rules of a fantasy world I've created by writing some of the background history for it. I would do this if I was planning to write a lot of stories or a large story set in a fantasy world, so that I could just keep myself focused on what the rules of the world are, and actually being able to remember the rules generally is easier if you understand why they came about. That's why I make it part of the history. The other reason I might use this is I do write content for other people, and I write the background to rationalize why certain things happen in the content I write so that someone else could pick up where I left off in the event that that was necessary. So basically, I am only going to focus on I'm going to invent a setting today. Some of it's going to be based on some of my one of my favorite TV shows. The rest of it is just what I'm making up on the fly. I'm only going to do one of the rules of the world today, but the point is that I would do this for each rule that I wanted in the world and build up the background that way so that I could justify why certain things are in the world, and that actually spawns ideas and content along the way. So let's get started. This is Scrivener here that you can see on screen. It has a corkboard that you can put little note cards on. You start off in the draft area with one untitled note card by default. I'm going to change that name to Rules. And then if I double left click in the top left hand corner, I'm going to write magic is real, humans can be sorcerers. That is the rule. That is the rule that I want to justify for my world. Okay, so I need to in order to understand why it works and how it came about, I'm going to do a little potted history of how humans became sorcerers. So I'm going to create a folder, which was right click on the timeline, on the corkboard, add and click new folder. And that gives me an untitled folder, which I'm going to call timeline. I blurted it out by accident a second ago. Okay, so double click on the folder icon on the top left and it brings me into the folder. Let's see, we're going to have a new note card, so add and new text. So that's right click, select add and then select new text, and I'm going to call it in the beginning because there's always a beginning. Now, much of the stuff that I'm going to write here will probably never make it into any of the things I write. Maybe once I'm finished writing a story, I might want to go back and do a sort of like an ancient prequel, sort of setting things up, because I think it might be interesting. But most of this is for my knowledge only, so that I can remain consistent. So we're going to call that in the beginning. Double click, and in the beginning, humans lived on a world called Farklewort. I am terrible at naming things on the fly. If you ever speak to any of my role players, they will tell you that I am horrendously bad at coming up with names on the fly. I have to have lists in advance, and I didn't have a world name in advance, so it's Farklewort. Humans are a primitive hunter-gatherer society with rudimentary tools and basic leather working. They've just started leather working. I'd probably want to do a little bit of historic research to see where leather working started, how far beyond the Stone Age that was, just to try and keep it reasonable. But at the moment, that's what I'm going with. They've managed to make leather clothing, leather armor, and probably stone tools. And that's not how you spell beginning. So that's in the beginning. That's the information I have there. That's what humans, they're on Farklewort, they're primitive, they're nowhere near being capable of magic, and that's fine. I'll just correct that spelling error there. They encounter a sorcerer. Let's see. If they could normally expect, in a fantasy world, you might expect them to naturally evolve to a point in civilization where they can actually learn magic as a sort of like an academic pursuit. but I'm going to say in this case they were actually sped along a little bit. They encounter a sorcerer. One of the tribes was fleeing a storm and hid in a cave. At the rear of the cave, they found advanced tunnels. By advanced, I mean like carved stonework, like so paving slabs and things like that. More technologically advanced than them. They found advanced tunnels, and they led to, let's say, a laboratory where they found an aging sorcerer who told them he wanted to teach them his arts. Okay, so that's how humans are going to get sorcery. They found someone who also appears to be a human, and he knows sorcery, and he's going to teach it to them. So that seems a little bit naff on its own. So we need an origin of the sorcerer. So we make another card, origin of the sorcerer. The sorcerer, let's say the sorcerer is a historian, the last survivor of a previous evolution of humans, and Farquhart is a long forgotten colony. Let's call the other evolution the Evos, just for ease. The Evos are a dying race. Something about their evolution has put them on a collision course with annihilation. And this sorcerer wants to impart his culture and his knowledge and his abilities because he doesn't want their race to be forgotten. So he learns of this ancient lost colony, and he finds that they're not dying. And he basically wants to pass on this knowledge. Okay, so what else? Yeah, the evils are a dying race. Humans from Farquhart have not evolved in the same direction, thus are not likely to encounter, let's say it was some kind of genetic plague or something, the genetic plague that is wiping out the evils. The sorcerer will speed their evolution through sorcery. This is important actually because this is the seed for perhaps it all goes wrong much later on, because maybe it was sorcery that's caused the problems in the first place, and he's just a little bit too arrogant to realise or accept it, and he wants to speed them along. Maybe they would have evolved the ability naturally, but he's dying and he doesn't have the time to wait for them. So sorcerer will speed their evolution through sorcery, so they are capable of magic and learning. We've also said here, that's okay, so that's how it happens and why. We've added information there that it was a lost colony, so actually that seems to be there are ruins. So I would add in a card about basically along the planet, on the planet. There are ruins on the planet, abandoned cities, and the ruins of lost fortifications and citadels from when the evils originally arrived. And when they left, they fell into disrepair. And that's a story in itself. Why did they leave? Why did they abandon the colony? Did they die out on the colony? And because because it was so remote, the evils forgot about them because it was just such a small, minuscule outpost. Who knows? But that's a story in itself, and that might be something worth pursuing later. All these ruins, maybe there are cool things in the ruins, maybe magical technology, spell books, or whatever that the evils used in their star travel. Because what's implied here is they could travel through the stars, or maybe it was they traveled through different realms, whatever. But there are ruins on the planet. Most of the rest of the planet is rural. Okay, that's cool. So we would actually probably put that in here, because you can select any of the cards and just drag them into the place you want it to be. So in the beginning, primitive humans, there are ruins on the planet, lost civilization, they encounter a sorcerer, the sorcerer is last of a dying race, and that's all cool. So that is the very, very basic stuff that I might write to justify the rule that magic is real in this world. Obviously, I could go into as much detail as I want. So I could talk about the primitive tribes, their society, their culture, their tools, everything like that. I could talk in great detail about the ruins if I wanted to, just so that, and actually, if you consider this a first draft, maybe I do go back and just expand on this anytime I get inspiration about it. They encounter a sorcerer, I could go back in and give him a name, a family name, I can give him motivations other than survival. I could actually write a little bit about this story that actually he's not a nice person, but he knows that his race is about to die and he doesn't want to be forgotten. And I could put that actually the him not being a nice man actually might come in the origin of the sorcerer. Why is he not a nice man? And so that's all the notes for the sort of like, this is how magic came into the world, and that is one of the rules. Now, if I had another rule, say for instance, the gods are real in this world, that they have actual real gods, I might then do a similar amount of note cards justifying how the gods came into existence. Maybe they just started, maybe they just came into existence with the birth of the universe, or maybe something else happened that brought them about. That is a decision that a fantasy writer makes. Maybe I want there to be necromancy as a branch of magic, and vampires and the undead and things like that, and I would then make a few cards in here in the timeline to justify it, and then I could read it through, tweak anything that needs tweaked. So apologies. So that anything that relates from one to another can be referenced in the other card. So maybe if I wanted to add vampires into the world, maybe there's something in the ruins that brings vampirism into the world. Maybe it was an evil experiment, and I put that in the rules card as a setup for vampires happening 10 cards down in the timeline. And the point is, every time I want to add into it, I build up the timeline, and then at any point that I want to review the timeline, I go to File, and then I click on the Compile command. Okay, so it's format as custom, I want it compiled for PDF, and it's selected everything that's in the sort of like the draft area, apart from rules. I don't want it to select the timeline folder because there's nothing written on it. There's only 4 documents, 4 note cards so far, but that'll do. No, I don't want that. I then want to, it's compile for PDF, and compile. Now I've already got a compile test there. I'm going to save over it. Excuse me. And we're now just going to skip ahead and go to the compile test. And here it is. We now have because there's only 4 paragraphs and they're in very early stages, it's just 1 page. But imagine if we then basically worked on other rules, this would actually basically compile into 1 document, which you could then read. It would be more interesting than trying to read through a whole bunch of note card titles. It'll be in the chronological order that it happens. This way, if you come back to a project months later and don't want to forget any of the crucial details, you've got your compiled document, and if someone else needs to work from it, they've got their sort of like their reference material quite easily. So there you have it. That is Scrivener that's how I use it for making histories in fantasy worlds, so that I can adhere to the rules, and compiling it into 1 document so that it's got easy reference. I hope that was of use to you. Don't forget to come and visit me on my blog again sometime. And if you want to have a check out on the rest of this channel, you'll find mostly gaming hobby stuff here, but you'll occasionally find other creative writing tutorials. So subscribe to the channel if you're interested. Thanks for watching. Bye.